In this video, we're going to talk about some of the other plugins available for Maven that actually come packaged with the Maven release. And up on the screen, I've got the reference for Maven 3.6.0. So you can see this was released in October 24th, 2018, up there in the top right-hand corner. Now, the one thing I want to point out here, which I found interesting, because that site plugin that we had to override to the proper version, if we come in here and we look under reference here to life cycles, and we come down here to the site life cycle, we can see that they are binding the life cycle to the 3.3 plugin, which is exactly the behavior that we saw at runtime. We got the 3.3, and if I come back over here to IntelliJ, let me minimize that. We can see that we had to go to 371. I was doing an experiment there. That's why that is commented out. So we had to go to 371. And I found that interesting because the thing that I wanted to come and point out in this video here is coming to the ref version under mavenapache.org. If we could do ref version, this comes up with the particulars for that release. Now, if we come down here and look at plugins, we can see the different releases of the plugins, and we can see the site plugin is 371, which is exactly what we wanted. However, in the bindings to the lifecycle, they are binding 3.3. So perhaps that's a mistake in Maven itself. And that's why we had to explicitly set that version, so that that binding version is not exactly reliable for us. So we want that 371, not 3.3. So I found that interesting here. And if we come to plugin management overall, we can see that bundled with this 3.6.0, we can see a variety of the plugins. And then there's a lot of plugins. Some of these we are going to hit in the course. Some of them we are not. There's some pretty obscure ones in here that we are not going to be addressing. Like the Maven Shade plugin, that one's very particular, and we are not going to be picking that up in there. Apache Rat, I actually don't even know what Rat is, to be honest. So there's some obscure ones in here, but we will be doing some plugins for Java Docs and some of the other ones. We definitely will have those coming up. But I wanted you to be aware of this list of, if you go to the Ref 3.60 plugin management, these are the plugins that are being bundled in that release. And there's a number of them in there, a number of things that are interesting, a number that are rather dated too. We have the Maven Enforcer plugin, the GPG plugin, Help plugin, Install plugin. So we've seen quite a few of these already. JavaDoc, we will be seeing that in an upcoming video for sure. PMD, and then SCM for working with source control management. So a lot of plugins here. I'm not going to be able to cover each and every one of them throughout the course, but we will be covering quite a few of them, especially the more important ones. And we probably are not going to be including Apache Rat. Main takeaway I want you to have from this video is to be aware of that there is Maven release specific documentation under maven.org, mavenapache.org, I should say, /ref/release. And getting that, we'll just get to the home page here. This is the home page for the 3.6.0 release. And this is going to tell you what to expect within that specific build of Maven. Now, fortunately, Maven is very, very stable. You don't see a lot of releases right now, maybe one or two per year, if that. So it is so stable. I like to say Maven's so stable it's boring. So it is rather boring because it is stable, it's mature, and it largely just works. All the kinks and nuances have been worked out. Because of the plugin architecture, it allows it a lot of stability within the project. But as you go through, a year from now, I'm sure there's going to be a new release and new versions and whatnot. So being able to go to the Apache Maven website and look up by the project documentation, there's a lot of rich information here about what's happening within Maven, especially around the releases. And more importantly, as we saw here, the bindings to the lifecycle. So if we look at the life cycles and the bindings, we can see the actual versions. And in this case, the versions that are being used may not be the latest release, unfortunately. So that looks like an opportunity for the Apache Maven team to address. And one other thing that I want to add to the statement here, back up one and come back to the plugins, plugin management. This list of plugins, this is what's included with the Maven 3.6.0 release. So this is bundled within that release, and you can expect to be able to reference those from the release, except for within life cycles. The point that I want to make here is that this is not a complete list of Maven plugins by any means. This is just what is bundled in the 3.6.0 release and their versions within the 3.6.0 release. Very important distinction there, because we are going to be looking at Maven plugins that are maintained outside of the Apache Maven organization. So they are third parties that have developed to the Maven plugin specification. For example, Spring Boot. We'll be talking about Spring Boot in an upcoming lecture, actually a whole module on Spring Boot. That is maintained by the Spring team, primarily backed by Pivotal, completely separate organization from Maven. So I didn't want to leave you with the impression that these are all the Apache plugins. These are not. This is just what is bundled with the 3.6.0 release. Not specifically, it is not an exclusive list. It is only a partial list of what's out there in the ecosystem. There's a lot of third-party plugins, and we will be exploring a number of third-party plugins coming up in the course.